Within a few short generations, the early Islamic Empire exploded outward, stitching together a massive new civilization across 3 continents. But as the founding generation passed away, a massive information vacuum opened up. Thousands of quotes, legal rulings, and historical accounts were left to circulate almost entirely by word of mouth. This created an incredibly vulnerable network. Soon, a flood of misinformation seeped in. Some of it was the result of innocent memory lapses, but much of it was intentional, political propaganda and fabricated quotes designed by storytellers to turn a quick profit. This rising tide of noise threatened to completely drown out the original truth, putting the foundational texts of the entire faith at severe risk. Securing the historical record of this civilization before the digital age required someone to invent a completely new way to filter oral data. Enter Yahya ibn Ma'in. As a young man in the late 8th century, Yahya suddenly inherited a staggering fortune from his father, 1 million silver dirhams. Most people would have purchased vast estates or secured a lifetime of luxury. Yahya looked at the crisis facing his era's history and saw a different use for the money. He liquidated his newfound wealth, deciding to pour every single coin into a massive, lifelong audit of the oral tradition. He traded absolute material comfort for a singular, obsessive goal, achieving absolute historical certainty. Yahya took his inheritance and hit the road. He traveled relentlessly across the ancient world, from Iraq to Egypt to the Hijaz and Yemen, tracking down anyone who claimed to hold a piece of the historical record. The sheer scale of his travel drained his bank account entirely. The young millionaire spent so much money chasing down sources that he eventually couldn't afford to even buy shoes. He went far beyond recording quotes. He acted as a private investigator, auditing the storytellers themselves, tracking their timelines, their political biases, and the sharpness of their memories. By logging the reliability of thousands of individual narrators, he transformed his own mind into a walking, breathing human database. His core method relied on stress testing the chains of transmission. Every quote had a chain of names attached to it, and Yahya cross-referenced thousands of these chains to find the weak links. He functioned like a human lie detector. If someone claimed to hear a quote from a specific teacher in Baghdad, Yahya checked his mental database to see if the 2 men were actually alive and in the same city at the same time. If a timeline didn't match, or if a narrator had a known history of lying, that specific chain was severed and permanently quarantined from the authentic record. We can see exactly how this abstract system worked in practice. One day, Yahya was sitting quietly in a crowded Baghdad mosque next to his famous peer, Ahmed ibn Hanbal. A popular storyteller stood up before the congregation. To win over the crowd and earn a few coins, he boldly delivered a highly embellished, completely fabricated religious quote. Then, the storyteller made a fatal error. To give his fake quote authority, he told the crowd he heard it directly from 2 major scholars, Yahya ibn Ma'in and Ahmed ibn Hanbal. Yahya didn't hesitate. He stood up, pointed directly at the man, and announced to the entire mosque that he was Yahya, his companion was Ahmed, and they had never heard this lie in their lives, instantly shutting the fraud down. For Yahya, history required active, sometimes ruthless public confrontation to defend the truth. His relentless auditing worked. Yahya's methodology became the gold standard, effectively locking down the historical tradition for an entire empire. His authority grew so immense that the most brilliant scholars of the 9th century would routinely refuse to accept a historical report until Yahya had personally peer-reviewed the names attached to it. However, acting as the final judge over the reputations of thousands of deceased individuals carried a heavy, terrifying moral weight. Late in life, he confessed his deepest fear: the terror that his rigorous audits might unfairly criticize men who had already earned paradise centuries ago. He took on this agonizing burden of judgment specifically to protect the wider public from deception. In the year 848, the local population recognized exactly what they had lost. To honor his life, they carried his body to the cemetery on the exact same wooden funeral bier that had once been used for the prophet. It was the ultimate gesture of respect, acknowledging Yahya as the definitive shield who had protected the prophet's legacy from centuries of lies. He was a man who gave away a vast physical fortune to build an imperishable intellectual one. Yahya ibn Ma'in engineered a mathematically rigorous architecture of truth, one that outlasted the empires of his time and preserved a civilization's history.